Hi, I'm Melissa Manning, and welcome to today's session, Be a Production Record Pro. We'll be diving into the ins and outs of production records, specifically looking at what auditors actually focus on during administrative review audits. Using real audit findings, we'll break down the key areas that you need to pay attention to. If you've ever wanted to avoid the dreaded audit drama and keep your kitchen in compliance, you're in the right place. A little about myself. I'm a school nutrition consultant and a previous menu auditor with the California Department of Education Nutrition Services Division. As a registered dietitian, I have lived and breathed production records for over 2 decades, which is either impressive or concerning. I founded My School RD and assist school districts with administrative reviews, special diets, and menu analysis. I especially love technology and AI, and I am a regular presenter at state and national School Nutrition Association conferences. So if you're coming to CSNA in November, come say hi. I'd love to meet you. Production records aren't just busy work. They're your legal proof that you offered a reimbursable meal. Auditors always say, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And if it didn't happen, say hello to expanded reviews and possibly even fiscal action. Production records are your behind the scenes kitchen documentary. They should, 1, tell the whole story of how meals were prepared and served, even that last minute switch from apples to strawberries. 2, they should list all menu items and required meal components. No, just saying milk isn't specific enough. Number 3, document food items and quantities. And number 4, don't forget field trips, special diets, and adult meals, because the auditors certainly won't forget them. They should also show the veggie subgroups were offered to every student, even the last student in line. This is a common audit finding. They should show that they meet weekly totals for all the meal pattern components and requirements. Another common audit finding. Next, they should align with the standardized recipes. And finally, they should note substitutions because the reviewer does not like the game. Guess what was served? How do I know this? Because I love reading, and one of my favorite things to read is audit findings. There are 10 years worth of California audit findings posted online for the public to see, and every time a school slipped up, it's documented. It's like a cheat sheet for the final exam, and the final exam is your administrative review audit. These findings not only tell us what went wrong, but they also tell us what to do right. The findings that I am referencing today in this session can be found via the QR code on the screen, and you can also request them. I'd be happy to send them to you. So now let's dig in. The first finding for today focuses on missing menu items and meal components. Finding number 16 on the AR finding list says, quote, grains were missing from the lunch on April 6th. The site served a whole grain dinner roll, but it was not recorded as offered or served on the production record. No meals will be disallowed. However, future incomplete records may result in fiscal action. Translation: the roll made it onto the tray, but not onto the paperwork. And auditors live by the motto, if it's not written down, it never happened. Besides, if I can't remember what I ate or snacked on last weekend, the odds of trying to recall what fruit was served a month ago, well, not great. And trying to invent that answer while standing nervously in front of an auditor, even worse. This next slide shows us on how using recipes and production records help us plan correct quantities. Cooking for a crowd isn't art, it's really math. Here's a few tips. Not sure how many servings to plan for? First, use your production records to track the last 3 times that an item was served and make adjustments accordingly. Made too much? Plan less. Not enough? Ran out? Plan more. Not tons more, just a bit more. You're looking for that just right number that leaves you with only a few servings left over. Now that you've forecasted an accurate number of planned servings, it's time to scale your recipe. In this finding, the auditor wanted the staff to be following the standardized recipe, but they didn't. Quote, the staff person cooked 30 pounds of raw ground beef. The reviewer verified that only 10 pounds was needed. And not only that, the employee used the package recipe to estimate the amount of pasta to serve. So they were not looking at the recipe provided by the district. They were looking at packaging information and were way off. If the staff had followed the district's recipe, this wouldn't have happened. Now let's look at another common audit finding, meal counts. Finding number 7 said, quote, staff indicated that snack counts are based on attendance from the daily sign-in sheet or number of leftovers. The finding will result in a disallowance of 31 meals. So this was a fiscal finding. So the site counted 31 snacks that were either never served because the kids didn't show up for school, or they were never served because maybe they didn't take the snack. And they claimed reimbursement for those. So auditors check and compare documentation with their observation. They are experts at finding out where people are taking shortcuts, and every meal count must be taken at the point of service. They take production records, they compare them against claims, and combine those with the on-site observations, and everything should match perfectly. Now, also, they should never exceed the attendance, and they should rarely match it perfectly every day. So if the attendance matches the claims perfectly every day, that's another trigger that the reviewer knows there's a problem. Next on our findings list is to record what was made, what was served, and how much was left over. It's important to complete all the columns on the production record, from planning through to making, and then offering to students, and then what happens afterwards. In finding number 19, the reviewer wrote, quote, records did not have a section to document leftovers by milk type and vegetable subgroup. So, why is this so important? Well, the reviewer wants to see the number of leftovers. Not too many leftovers, but definitely not 0. Stating 0 leftover means to an auditor that you ran out and not all students got a chance to take that food item. Now, if that food item was required for the minimum meal contribution requirements, then we have a problem. Knowing if the item is essential to the requirements can be challenging. So what do we need to do? Well, I recommend the best thing to do is to replace that item for something that counts equally in the meal pattern. So, for example, if you run out of spiral fries, then as a starchy vegetable, substitute that with another starchy vegetable, corn. Now, with another little note here on forecasting, if you have 100 students and are planning the number of non-fat white milks to purchase, do you need to purchase 100 non-fat white milk? No. Use your data. Look at the last 3 times that it was offered. If the last time you offered 5 and ran out, next time, offer 6 or 7. Don't offer 100. Hungry children deserve better than wasteful overestimates. Next, we're moving on to the forgotten few: a la carte, adult, and special diet meals. You're probably great at tracking 90% of the meals you serve, but oftentimes auditors are looking for those edge cases, those special circumstances, uh, field trips, adult meals, special diets. Those are the ones that sneak up and lead to findings. In finding number 18, the auditor was really clear. They said, quote, "Field trip and special dietary meals were not documented on the menu production records or some other record to indicate exactly what was offered or provided to the students." So it didn't matter if it was directly on the production record or if these meals were tracked somewhere else. They just needed to be tracked, and it needed to be recorded exactly what was offered to those students and provided to them. Now, this can be an additional big problem beyond an AR. It's liability, especially if a student has a reaction. One of my clients had thorough records, and they were able to prove that when a student got a reaction, they received a meal from them that was aligned to their medical accommodation. So they turned elsewhere in the investigation, and turns out the student ate a cookie from a friend, and it was not the school meal. But without that record, things could have gone very differently. Now let's move on to having a choice of milk. Why is milk variety such a super common finding? Well, it turns out through reading all these AR findings, it's for a lot of different reasons. So, one reason is that students don't like fat free, unflavored milk. So, the staff is like seeing it go to waste or not get taken and doesn't want to offer it and just stops. Another reason is that the school sites skip milk choices on things like field trips, grab and go meals, or breakfast in the classroom, and that gets caught. A third reason is that the staff sometimes just writes milk on the production records and doesn't note the types offered with their separate quantities and amounts left over. Yet another reason is that staff has a habit of writing zeros for the amounts left over instead of actual amounts. This suggests that they ran out of milk. And if they ran out of one type of milk, it means that some students might not have the choice of milks that's required. And that is another compliance issue. So let's look at finding number 12. Finding number 12 states, quote, "Fluid milk variety in field trips is required. Only one type of milk was offered to students on a field trip on the day of review. The menu production record for the day of review did not contain the milk options that were available to students on field trips." So, what does that mean? That means that the staff was not even told that they had to offer a choice of milk. So, we want to make sure that's really clear. And then the auditor followed up by saying, quote, "The lunch provided to the transitional kindergarten and kindergarten is a grab and go lunch." Now, those students also did not receive a milk choice. And remember the rule, if it's not recorded, what? It didn't happen, right? So, just writing milk, even if you are offering a choice, doesn't cut it for an audit. Be specific. Is it fat-free white, 1% chocolate, etc.? And do actual counts. If you estimate that you served 37, but you had 0 left over, it means you ran out, and that is out of compliance. Next, let's talk about some veggie subgroup snafus. Just because something sounds like a bean doesn't mean it's a bean. And if it looks green, doesn't mean that it's actually in the green subgroup either. So green beans, not a bean, not green. So what group are they in? Can anyone answer? Yes, they're in the other subgroup category. So let's take a look at finding number 4. The reviewer said, quote, "The SFA offered half cup of 3-bean salad during the week to meet the bean pea vegetable subgroup. However, there was only a quarter cup of creditable vegetables from the beans peas vegetable subgroup in this dish, since it contained other ingredients such as green beans and dressing." So it's just really important to take a look at your veggie subgroup chart and make sure that those items really do belong in that subgroup. Now, in this finding, the reviewer went on to say that, quote, "The reviewer expanded the review of menu production records to determine if the finding occurred throughout the whole month, and it did not." Phew! Thankfully, the issue wasn't repeated. But still, we definitely want to avoid these kinds of troubles of them expanding the review from 1 week to the entire month of scrutiny. Now let's move on from veggie subgroups to whole weekly requirements. Now, you can't just guess on weekly requirements. They're actually based on a lot of calculations, including algebra. The menu planner carefully calculates not just daily, but then also weekly requirements in a lot of different areas. There's grains, meat alternate, vegetables, veggie subgroups, grains-based desserts, juice, percentage, fruit, milks, calories, saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and now we're going to also be doing sugar in future years. And this is all done so you don't have to. That's the good news. But imagine how it feels to go through perfectly balancing all those requirements, only for staff not to follow the menu. Finding number 14 says that, quote, "The reviewer found a shortage in the weekly minimum grain requirements. Only 5 ounces were provided." See, the school offered cereal every day because the students loved it and it was really easy to serve, even though it wasn't on the menu. They didn't realize that this dropped the weekly amount down to 5-ounce equivalent grains, and it became a big problem during the audit. So please, follow the menu. There's a lot of reasons why it was planned that way. All right, so this next slide is on the quote, "I'll fill it out later" syndrome. I've had this before. I know what it feels like. But spoiler, so many times this happens and, schools just don't fill them out later. So finding number 10 says, quote, "When the reviewer requested copies of the NPRs at the end of the day, the employee said she did not complete them. Her plan was to take them home and complete them. The reviewer requested copies of the existing NPRs, and we walked together to the kitchen office. The employee picked up a clipboard and flipped through a stack of blank NPRs for the entire month of March. Completed NPRs were not available for the month of review, February, either." Whoa. Auditors have a special knack at figuring out when schools aren't documenting properly. So if your answer is, or your thought ever is, "I'm going to do it later," auditors have seen this before, and it is a recipe for disaster. All right, so finally, one more finding. Finding number 1 on our audit findings list says, quote, "The food service employee did not offer fruit to students during breakfast until the food service director arrived and instructed them to do so. For the remainder of the breakfast service, the employee sporadically required half-cup fruit as part of a reimbursable breakfast. Some students were told, quote, 'You have to take a fruit today.' Therefore, 13 breakfast meals were disallowed due to missing fruit." When I read that one, I was like, whoa. My eyeballs popped out of my head and rolled across the floor like bouncy soy-based meatballs. I wonder if this employee knew that their attitude was going to be posted online in the audit findings to the public for anyone to see. So, I really want to thank you for watching. I mean, for reals, you're probably doing great. I know there's a lot here. It can get complicated and mistakes happen. And like we're all in a learning process. This material, probably there's parts of it that are totally fresh and new. But the fact that you're here today and watching this, it means you care, you're here to learn, and that makes you really, honestly, already ahead of the game. It's all a work in progress. Now, if you've got any questions or you want to share a horror story of your own, I'm here. Just ask the person in charge today to send me your thoughts and your questions. I'd love to hear them. And thanks for listening. Good luck with those records, and I hope to see you at the next conference. Bye.